It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, folks. I am Rob, and this is my State of the Dungeon address for the game that took place on November 18th, 2021. This was the final session of the Mighty Protector's Gifter Saga. Now, first of all, I apologize to anybody who's involved who will be less than satisfied with this game, but considering that in the game, certain acts of violence were perpetrated upon people who actually are real, even though the game itself is pure fantasy and fiction, we will be blurring some lines, because I don't want to pop up on a certain, any watch lists. So, at any rate, the party was there against the backdrop of a major fight that was taking place between two very, very powerful supers. And if you don't know who they are, check earlier versions of the State of the Dungeon address, that's all I'm going to say. They were just finishing besting a group of very, very, very outclassed gifted from another world power, and things were seemingly in hand, except for the fact that a number of things were happening above them as the two major powers were fighting it out. The group basically took the opportunity to take care of a few things that they had been meaning to. Bulwark flew up to try to move the daughter of one of the superpowers that were fighting above, and did end up moving her out of the way. The rest of the group basically finished off the super team that they were fighting. Eventually, they looked around and noticed that one of the children of the superpower in question was walking around on their ship, but he didn't have his armor on anymore. And they couldn't figure out how he lost his armor. When they asked him, he couldn't remember wearing any armor, which eventually they caught on that happens to be the trademark of the ninja who had stolen his armor and, using his OP stealth powers, went over into the Russian cruiser and basically detonated their magazines, taking it out, which was pretty, he's been improving his powers as well. And actually some of them, once he got the arsenal from the power armor that he was wearing, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So, they were treated to the fact that he scored the cruiser. And as he rejoined all of them, they were, kind of a little surprised to find out that the superpower on nominally their side had taken some damage. His armor had been compromised, and he had been attacked directly by his opposition, which then prompted him to drain the energy of all of his supporters, including the children who were present, which killed them, which kind of made them go, whoa. And as they dropped lifelessly, he powered up and blasted his opposition and utterly vaporized him. So he won, which didn't make them all that happy, honestly. They didn't like either dog in the fight. So Muscles then, who was incoming back to the ship slowly, the reason that he was coming in slowly was when Cygos was flying around. That was when Clayton's army made their little move. One of them was able to create a crystalline prisons, who happened to be the opposition and nemesis to Sentinel. And well, he imprisoned Cygos for a very short time until Muscle smashed the prison. there was a brief bit of conflict. Firestorm and Extra Crispy looked like they were having a fight at first. Samedi looked like he was summoning masses of the undead around to attack them. There was a number of circumstances that looked like it was going to get pretty hairy. But then, Muscles grabbed a hold of the triumphant superpower and dropped down, which he was then assisted by Rook, who increased his gravity and slammed into the ship and rolled darn near minimum damage. As much as he wanted to be wearing him as a suit by splattering him into the deck of the aircraft carrier, nope. He bounced off and barely even winded his quarry. So, the group kind of stepped up because they don't like this guy. They don't want to see him walking away with near ultimate power. And he's just radiating off power from the experience that he gathered in and such. At this point, Clayton made his move and immediately grabbed and started trying to absorb his power by using a custom suit that was primarily there just to ensure that he could draw the power into himself. And the group didn't want that, of course, so they did everything they could to Clayton to try to stop him from absorbing the power, including directly attacking him. That probably wouldn't have been very effective because his defenses were incredible. But then Lancelot stepped up. Lancelot, of course, the finest weaponsmith, able to do things with a normal sword that most people couldn't even dream of. And his sword doesn't really qualify as normal anyhow. And just laid into Clayton, Lord Warbridge, and badly damaged his armor. It had so much ablative armor, but Lancelot just wrecked it. So then Bulwark's like, okay, I'm just going to go up and I'm just going to punch him. What he didn't know was that the weakness of Clayton was that he had a dark fate. He was fated to die from one of the group, which was randomly rolled. And it was Bulwark, who didn't seem to be the type to murder somebody. But the moment he was going to make an attack on Warbridge, that was it. He was going to die. And it just turned out his ablative armor was down to the point where his punch went through the armor and right through. He was doomed. And killed him with a punch, which he seemed a little shocked at. But see, this was fated, and what Warbridge had been counting on was that from the power that he was stealing, he was basically going to become a godling. So even though he was going to die, he was going to come back with all of this power. That didn't work right, because he never got a chance to steal nearly as much power as he wanted to. So all of this was kind of for naught. This was an endgame that started from the very minute Warbridge contacted them. And at the very last minute, things went awry. Why? Because the group was destined as the everymen who could change the book by their actions. And that was how it played out. It was perfect. It actually worked out exactly. And Destiny things are tough. Destiny things are really hard. They almost never work quite right. This one worked perfectly. Bulwark attacked him when he had no defenses left, and that finally put an end to Clayton / Lord Warbridge. And the coup de grace of the whole thing was that Sentinel finally managed to put the rampaging, godling superpower to sleep when I had a 15% chance only of failing, and I failed to resist Tom's sleepy time gun, which knocked him out. And then Rook took his graviton hammer and went up, cold shot to the head, rolled a 1, splat, dead. Nothing I could do. He did it for the good of the world. His intentions were pure, I trust, but dead. After that, there really wasn't much left to do. Everybody on board was dead. The attacking cruiser was sinking. The people who were on it were fleeing across the Bering Strait away from the group. The aircraft carrier was largely still intact, so they were able to get back onto the boat with chauffeur and head back to Anchorage, take the flight back to the Eagle's Nest out of Albany, and happy ending. The world is going to change, and they got to talk to Veronica again, and Veronica told them basically how things had fallen out. All of these different stories around the world had been tied up. The Aztec, Mayan, Incan battle down in South America, only one person walked away from it, and it was just the reincarnation of a sun king. The Ragnarok had happened. Everybody died except for one person, Balder, who seemed to be stripped of his powers and was just made a man. And all over the place. King Arthur was still around, sure, and pretty cool, but he really wasn't interested in being the king of England in such a way that he was going to change the way everybody lived. He was listening to the people around him because he was pretty wise, and all he really wanted was England to be okay. And he can wear the crown for the rest of his natural life, and everybody's okay with that. With his levels of cool, he's aces. And he's got Queen Elizabeth as his advisor regent. So, she doesn't mind, because she got a whiff of his massive cool rating, and she's like, oh, you're fine. You're a good lad. You can be king for a while. So, yeah, it ended up, tying off the loose ends, explaining how things were going, and then they got visited by the Gifters, who congratulated them on getting through to the end and throwing them some surprises and filling out their roles perfectly well. They got to ask some questions about how everything worked, why, when are we going to do this again, and the Gifters assured them that they weren't interested in that. All of the loose ends throughout history, all of the different questions about strength of character, of humanity, had been put to the test, and for the most part, humanity had been proven to be completely adequate. They didn't need the legends of old to do any more than to spark their imaginations from time to time. But they weren't going to be stripped of their powers. The Gifters couldn't even do that, they said. So there will be no other gifts given. Nobody's going to have these ridiculously amazing powers. Since most of the primary principal gifted are no more. Most of the people who are still left with gifts are, low-level powers that never really showed up as anything much. Also, the compulsion to go after your nemesis has been stripped away. Nobody will have the absolute need to go find out their nemesis and kill them. Most of what they had been told by Sven had kind of come to pass, but Sven was kind of caught up in archetypes and his own imagining, so some of the things there was no apocalyptic good versus evil battle. That played out basically in the battle they were witness to. Good versus evil, and ultimately they decided none of that. We're cutting it off. There's not going to be a huge army raised that we're all going to have to fight against. They stopped it. So, yeah. The only person who's taken out of the equation is Sven. Sven was the sage. He was the one whose role was to dispense information and bring people knowledges, and he did that all right. But he's also the only person who can't be allowed to stay among humanity because he would advance their technology level, and that would take away a lot of the agency of humanity to decide their own futures. Instead of, even though Sven would have the best of intentions, he would bring them into super science way before humanity was ready for it. So, Sven is being taken off by the Gifters, and he's fine with it. He understood his role, so he's all right. The Downers, Lord Warbridge is still alive, which means that if we ever go back and revisit the post-Gifter world, there's still a good villain out there, Lord Warbridge. But the problem is, he doesn't have a power anymore because he doesn't have the book. The Gifters don't have anything left to give to him. He had the book of the whole conflict of the adventure, and it's gone. So now he has the most powerful superpower left in existence that doesn't work anymore. And likewise, Veronica doesn't have anything else either, but you know, she's doing okay. Trust me on that. Veronica's fine. A few odds and ends questions that came out, but nothing really. And if any of the players involved actually have further questions, I had it all planned out. There was a reason for pretty much everything that happened. Even if not everything went perfectly as I had intended, you know, I was very satisfied with the resolution of the story. So, yeah. If you have any questions, leave in the comments below, or leave in the Facebook group that we have Basement Still Gaming, and I will address those as anybody have. But I think we tied everything off pretty nicely and neatly, so that those characters will continue on. They are genuinely some of the most powerful superheroes in the world. And will be. There's really not going to be any contest for them. They can't raise their powers anymore like they were doing so much to evolve and adapt their powers. They're frozen now where they're at, but they're pretty darn good. So they'll be fine. And then now they can actually enjoy themselves and being awesome superheroes in a world that doesn't have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of superheroes. But it does have superheroes, and one last gift to humanity is that every once in a while somebody will be born with the potential to develop a superpower. Won't be anything earth-shattering, but just enough to tweak the noses of scientists to figure out how it happens, and madden them to the fact they can't explain it. But the gifters are stepping back completely from humanity, just fit to observe, unless they have to come forward if some apocalyptic threat comes up that threatens all of humanity and erases all the work that they have done. Then they will come forward with the gifts once more and do what they can to help out. But the group seemed pretty satisfied, and I think it was a good ending. So, thus ends the Gifter Saga. Next step, Session 0 for a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game, starting with Dragon Heist, the pre-made adventure from Wizards of the Coast. It is a modular, somewhat variable adventure, which I like, and it puts the characters in a great opening position that I'm very happy about. So looking forward to running that. If you are a player in the group, don't read it in advance. You're going to enjoy some of the stuff better without spoilers. If you've already read it, yeah, I will be tweaking things too. So, just to warn you. Alright, that's all I've got for you. Thank you for joining me. This has been a campaign that started in May of 2020 and has now ended in November of 2021. So, a year and a half. That included most of the COVID year. It was quite the campaign. Started off online, and eventually we got back to face-to-face, but yeah, tough stuff. But I think we'll remember this one for quite some time. And it sounded like the players really did like the Mighty Protectors game system, so that's a good thing too. We've discovered a new game to play together. And that's all I got. So until next time, thank you and farewell.